Whenever you rent or buy a video, you need to be sure that the film you choose is suitable for the audience at home.
Do sit down. We're just about to have some tea.
Ladies and gentlemen, please do not panic, but scream! Scream for your lives!
Hey weirdos, the kettle's boiled. Welcome to Tea for Terror, where we take a favourite horror film and dissect it over a nice cup of tea. I'm your host, Andrew Graves, and my guest today is here to tell us about the best screams on the small screen. Welcome, James Whittington. How you doing, mate?
Hello, buddy. Nice to hear from you again.
Enjoying the weather?
Yeah, we've had a lovely day of summer. It's been beautiful.
Yeah, for those, because, you know, amazingly enough, we do get people listening to this podcast all over the world. It's incredible.
Ooh.
So we get people like in, I don't know, fucking Brazil and Germany and the USA, all over the place. It genuinely is like ridiculous. So for those that live in countries where you have, you know, nice weather,
Thanks for that. Yeah,
we don't. We get probably, you know, 2 days of sunshine a year, and the whole country goes nuts. You know, you get your big lads out immediately, stripping to the waist, walking around like
tattoos out,
lobsters. You know, ice cream vans immediately sell out. The fridge blows up at Tesco's. You know, there's a war, you know, we'll have a hosepipe ban within about 5 seconds of there being nice weather. So we don't really understand summer.
No.
And
I'm follically challenged, which makes it even worse. You know,
oh wow.
with shiny beard.
Well, to be fair, I'd be more than happy if the weather all round was just like kind of not hot, just kind of mild. I'm happy with mild, because I like my clothes and stuff, and I like dressing up, and summer, when it is on those couple of days when it is hot, I don't know what to wear, because I tend not to go anywhere because I don't like not dressing up, and I'm not a shorts guy, and I'm not a kind of t-shirt guy, you know.
Right, you're a smart suit and decent pair of shoes
that's
guy.
it. And you know, yeah, so it's difficult, you know. Or me.
No, I feel so sorry for you.
It's such a first world problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but summer, no, it's crap in this country. Absolute shite. Yeah. So what have you been up to then?
Mainly stuff for NYX TV at the moment. We recently did HorrorCon UK down in Sheffield, and it was just a blast. It was absolutely brilliant. Met a load of new fans who weren't aware of the channel. The main hook was that we're free to view, and the amount of people who stopped when you said the word free was amazing. But we met such, you know, horror fans are the best fans. You know, yes, they're critical of their product and what they like, and you know what, they're very loud about things like that, very opinionated. But we all are. But they were just really nice people. It's a while since I've been to a convention like that. I think the last one was the is it XL in London. There's like a sci-fi horror convention, but this one was slightly smaller but more fun. You know, really enjoyed that. And you know, NYX is going from strength to strength. It really is. We're now on Freely 578, which is it's a new service. I think it's on Hisense TVs and Bush TVs. If you're just getting recent ones, a free app on there. So you know, it's onwards and upwards.
Well, I mean, obviously, normally when we do an episode, as we mentioned in the introduction, normally Tea for Terror, for those who've never listened before, we do ordinarily concentrate. A guest comes on and picks a particular horror film that they have some connection to, or they like, or whatever, and we kind of pull apart that horror film. But occasionally we do these kind of special episodes, and this is another special episode. So James has been on. He's the most. He's returned the most. This is James's fourth appearance.
Yeah, yeah.
So we decided. So obviously James has looked at a few different individual horror films, but we decided we are going to do a special episode today. Essentially, because as James just mentioned there, he works for a TV station called NYX, which specializes in horror, and they show some really good stuff. So a little bit later on, we're going to get stuck into that, and we're going to look at what NYX is, what it offers, and the kind of things that are coming up, and then we're going to pick some examples of things that are coming up in the next couple of months or next month or so on NYX. And we're going to pick apart some of those because there's some sort of classics coming up. So we're going to look at that and we'll get to the bottom of what the ethos of NYX is. But before we do that, ordinarily when guests come on for the first time, we talk about how they got into horror and what was their sort of introduction into horror films. But obviously, because James has been on a few times before, we're not going to do that. So, but I do think it tying into the idea of television. I think it'd be really good to have a quick chat about. The, I mean, obviously, we've mentioned on the podcast before with yourself and other people, the growing up, particularly if you grew up in like the 70s or whatever,
Mhm,
we were very much exposed to quite a lot of horror, I guess, whether it was prime time, whether it was kind of like, Tales of Unexpected kind of stuff, or whether it was
mhm,
even things like Scooby-Doo and you sort of kid shows that had these kind of horror angles or
mhm,
or the more specific stuff, like obviously in the 70s and 80s, we had the BBC Two double bills where they'd show two horror films of a Saturday night, which was for a lot of us, that is just an incredible sort of
starting point, wasn't it?
rose tinted memory. I mean, it was
Mhm,
brilliant, and it absolutely, yeah, like you say, it was a complete starting point. It was where a lots of us, that's where we learned to love and appreciate horror films.
mhm.
And obviously later on you got things like Movie Drone, which would show quite a lot of horror and cult stuff. Um, but I'm just interested in, are there any specific times or occasions you can remember that aren't necessarily about those double bills that where you saw something and it was almost like it made some sort of connection and it led you to look at other
Mhm.
things.
Yeah, I think it was Dennis Skiffitt's horror movies book, the one with the wonderful green cover. I
Yeah.
saw that in my local W.H. Smith's. Mustn't have been still 10, 11. And it's just something about that because I'd seen a couple of horror films on the TV, mainly the black and white ones. But this was like a whole new world of what had gone and what was just relevant then in the early 80s, and it just blew me away. All these information, obviously the internet wasn't there, and it was just I just soaked it up, and I read it from cover to cover constantly. It was just the book I would always read, always look at the pictures. I just poured over it, and I think that got me really into that. I had the House of Hammer comics, which turned into the Halls of Hammer, then the Halls of Horror. I think after they lost the Hammer license, and the cartoon work in those, like the comic strips of the old Hammer films themselves, were just beautiful. I'd love some of that artwork on my walls. It was just incredible, and that helped. Support from what I've been watching.
I think, for me, I mentioned this again and again, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But for me, it was first of all, it was the Alan Frank movie Treasury of Horror Movies. That was the one
Mm,
for me. My brother had that. He got a copy of that for Christmas, and he was about 5 years older. But of course,
mhm.
being a younger kid who at that point, I would just follow whatever my brother did.
Yeah.
I started thumbing through this book. So, they were very formative. Later on, I
Mhm.
got like it wasn't a great copy. It was like a paperback version of the Gifford book. They had this
Mhm.
really awful cover.
Right.
But I had that so many years and it kind of fell to bits. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I was really lucky
Mhm.
rummaging around a charity shop and managed to find a hardback copy with the
Yeah.
the dust sheet and everything on the
Lovely.
dust cover. The original, proper
Mhm.
first edition, I think for about £2 or £3, and it's beautiful. It's and you
Mhm.
can smell. It's been in someone's garage. You can smell it, and it's a brilliant book. But yeah, all of that, both of those books for me, and a few other books as well, a
Mhm.
few other Alan Frank books as well.
Mhm.
They became like your I guess more mainstream sort of
Mhm.
versions. People have these kind of A to Z or 1,000 films you should see.
Mhm.
But I think for us as horror fans, I've spoken to a few people who are still trying to work their way through the list of the Gifford
Yeah.
films,
Yeah. Yeah.
just trying to go through that because it was
Mhm.
a big deal, was because before VHS and all that, it was, or, before video, it was. You
You
know,
relied on the
you
TV.
really did have to wait. You had to wait for these things to come up on
Mhm.
TV. And when they did, by God, you had
Mhm.
to watch them. Now,
Yeah.
luckily, you're probably like me. My parents were fairly slack,
Yeah. Absolutely.
and particularly later on. I mean, it sounds like a, boohoo tragedy, but, my mum and dad split up, and my dad, he was there, obviously fed us and all that, but
Mhm.
he'd be out quite a lot. So
Mhm.
he didn't give a fuck what we were watching, So it was kind of like, so in on in some ways it's it's a
Mhm.
bit more Ken Loach.
Yeah.
I try to remember it as I had
Yeah.
access to whatever horror films I wanted, really.
You used
But
to sit there in front of the television with your kestrel on your arm, didn't you?
but you did, yeah, yeah. My
Eating
dead kestrel
Orvis.
because my brother had
Yes.
killed it. Um, no, but I mean, obviously, all of those kind of double bills. But I
Mhm.
think it was because they were a massive event. They were just like, they were just something you had to do, those double bills. But as I said, when it was kind of just waiting, or thumbing through the Radio Times or whatever, and it's just waiting for those films to come up, and that invariably, I'm not saying it was every week or every day or anything, but
Mhm.
I think BBC particularly and ITV, they had, in
Mhm.
the 70s and 80s, they would show things that you just don't see now. And obviously
No.
they're probably cropped up on Blu-ray or whatever. But yeah, there's lots of
Mhm.
things. I remember seeing The Baby on BBC Two,
Mhm.
really strange cult film, and just like, what the hell is this?
Mhm.
Um, I
Stuff that
remember,
wouldn't dare show now, really.
yeah, very specifically, I remember watching, and I mean, the thing is, if you didn't have, because we didn't tend to get the Radio Times, you just flicked
Mhm.
through whatever was on well, not flicked, you actually physically stabbed the telly, 'cause you didn't have remote control, you
Yeah,
know.
stand up,
Um,
yeah.
so you'd sometimes you'd because you only had three channels up until Channel 4 came along, you'd stumble across things, as we spoke
Mhm.
about before. And that was a big thing. And like I said, because you didn't have the Radio Times or the listings, you couldn't just go on Google and find out what was on.
Mhm.
You know, I remember I'd missed the first sort of 5, 10 minutes, but I remember seeing the film Hitchcock's Frenzy and
Yeah.
not knowing anything and not knowing it was a
Mhm.
Hitchcock film, just seeing this from like 10 minutes in, thinking, what, this is
Mhm.
brilliant. I love this.
Mhm.
And, getting to the end, going to bed, as a kid, you don't
Mhm.
pay any attention to the credits at the end or anything. So I went to bed, didn't see that, and I always had this film in. What is that film? I love that film. And
Mhm.
then, years later, bought the Hitchcock DVD box. I've got it on Blu-ray now, but I bought
Mhm.
a DVD box set. It was on sale. We decided to go through all of the Hitchcock films in this box set. Came towards the end, put
Mhm.
this film on. That's the film. That's the
That's the
film. It's
one.
Frenzy, and it's like, yeah,
Mhm.
and it's always been one of my favorite films, certainly one of my favorite Hitchcock films. I love that. And I love that idea. And I think as well, because you always had the Hammer stuff,
Mhm.
and it was this weird thing in the 70s and 80s where you'd watch these films, and a lot of time you get these things crop up on either BBC on a Friday or Saturday night or whatever, or sometimes in the midweek, and you get, either it would be like a Hammer film or a Tygon film or an
Mhm.
Amicus film. All these like fantastic British companies that for a
Mhm.
while made great horror films. Um, but what I liked about it, because it's only in obviously in the last 20 years or so, I started to make the connections. Well, this is an Amicus film and this is a Tygon film.
You
And
can
just
start telling which
because
one's
as a
which. Yeah.
kid, you're not really you just see Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, or whatever. It's a horror
And you
film, it's
watch.
color, it's from this certain era, and they all kind of like amalgamated. So I didn't. I would just like a lot of kids did. I knew Hammer, so I would just, if I saw an Amicus film or Tygon film, it was like, oh, that's a Hammer film. And it wasn't until
Mhm,
later on you picked through it and just started to discern and saw the
mhm.
individual. But those, I think, watching a lot of those Amicus films, as much as I loved Hammer, it was kind of Amicus always felt much groovier. They were just kind of like, because a lot of them were modern day and it was like on location
Mhm.
stuff as well.
Yeah.
They just made more sense to me, and it was kind of like, you know, again, I've said this before, but Amicus it always had that. It wasn't always about class, but it was your more council house horror, and it had that, it was that kind that you'd have the monster or the fantastic stuff, and then in the background
Mhm,
you'd have a chip wrapper blowing away, that, or it was grimier and grottier, and the
mhm.
you know the best example I think for me is like From Beyond the Grave, where you've
Oh,
got
yeah.
Peter Cushing in the curiosity shop, and you've got him with his Yorkshire accent, and that the brilliant segment with Donald Pleasance and Diana Dawes, and it's
Mhm.
so working class and
Well,
so
yeah.
like council house. It's so kitchen
Mhm.
sink. It's fantastic. I loved all that.
See, I think that's what Hammer did right when they did the Hammer House of Horror, even
Yes,
though it was
yeah, it was
Hammer
much
did
more
it.
amicus, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It was all modern. All of it was modern day stuff. And that if they'd only been able to get that on the big screen, they would have survived a little bit longer. But if they'd done something like Hitchcock changed his stuff to suit the period, because you look at Frenzy and you look at Psycho, yes, they're both pretty. Psycho was still pretty edgy for its time. But you look at, I think I was shocked with Frenzy because Bernard Cribbins swore in it, and I'd never seen Bernard Cribbins swear before.
Yeah, he plays a
And
nasty old bugger in that, didn't he? In
yeah, and
Frenzy.
it's just like if they'd just been able to find that or have, find their own John Carpenter sort of person, to direct, or even look to Europe more instead of looking towards Asia and getting the Shaw Brothers involved. Maybe if they hadn't done that, they were doing it right with them to the, is it, um, was it to the devil? Was it to the
The
devil a
devil
child? Is it
to the devil a
devil a
daughter.
daughter?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
The
if they
sort
if
of.
they continued to look that way, I think they would have survived a bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's based on the sort of Dennis Wheatley
Hmm.
novel, but yeah, you could tell that they were kind of leaning towards The Omen and The Exorcist,
Hmm.
and going for those kind of vibes.
Hmm.
I do quite like that film, but also I think, around the same time, I think that was the last sort of
Yeah.
Hammer film of that era, a horror film. But they also, I think the year before, or possibly the same year, they also did, Captain Kronos as well, and that was that.
Mm.
I think that, that could have been,
The franchise act, isn't it?
yeah, it definitely could. That could have been a TV show easily. That
Yeah,
I'd have lapped that up.
I love that. That
Yeah,
was just way off. Maybe that if they had getting the Vampirella movie up and running, that could have been a similar vein, literally.
yeah.
But going back to impressions, I remember I bought I started looking for movie books, then I found a few softbacks, but I found a vampire one, and I bought it without looking inside, birthday money or something. It was full of vampire films I'd never even heard of, and these were the James Franco films and things like that. Stuff there's no way you could see in the UK at the time, and that was just amazing. Full of black and white shots.
Was it this one?
It was exactly that one,
Yeah.
exactly that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's some beautiful the posters in this of the
Uh-huh.
Franco films, and it's amazing, isn't it? It's great. It's just a fantastic book just to flick through.
Mhm.
It looks amazing, and
And that took me away
particularly.
from all the hammers and amicus and tigons. I didn't know about European horror, European cinema full stop being so young. That made me want to find out more. And I think they're really, it's a shame internet did spoil a lot of things, but books like that, I'd buy at the drop of a hat. That's why Fab Press and people like that are really good still.
Yeah, I've got tons of books,
Hmm.
specifically about horror films and court films, and a lot of them I'm lucky enough to pick up from charity shops and junk shops, but
Hmm.
it fascinates me. And it never stops fascinating me. I love it. Anything, anything to do with that, I'll just snap it up straight away and worry about reading it later and getting into it. I just collect and collect and collect, and
Hmm.
they're always there as a great resource.
Hmm.
So yeah, I love all that. So so we're going to spend some time talking about NYX then, because I mean we talked about it at the top of the show. You mentioned it before, and you've kind of gone into some detail, but not. So obviously this is a special episode, so I'm just wondering. So to those that don't know and have not really tuned in,
Hmm.
what is it that NYX does? What is their kind of ethos, and what kind of things are they putting across? And what is it? How are they appealing to the sort of new or old horror fan, would you say?
I think basically what it was to get as much quality horror entertainment on screens for free. Basically, it's all ad revenue and things like that. And it was created by the woman Corinne Ferguson, who's the CEO. It's got together this small team. Um, there's Chris and David Bond there, and David's a film producer as well, and who just knows he's encyclopedic, of his horror knowledge. And they wanted to curate a horror channel that would appeal to fans, really appeal to fans, to show things you would not normally see, like the Jez Franco films, like the Tales from the Crypt Keeper cartoon series, things like that. Because between I think it's 6 and 9 at night, it is family orientated. It's Tales from the Crypt stuff on like that. One Step Beyond anthology series, black and white classics. Lon Chaney Jr. is seems to be forever around on an afternoon. They go back and do silent cinema. So Lon Chaney's Phantom of the Opera's there, Hunchback of Notre Dame's there, and it's just to show people it's not just the hammers and it's not just amacuses. This is what horror entertainment's all about, and they show it from all around the world. It's based in Canada, where the channel reflects its content there. They've started moving into their own programming, having people like Chris Alexandra, who used to be the editor of Fangoria, introducing Canadian movies and why they're important, things like that, bookending them. Got Alan Jones doing Fright Fest Saturday Scares. And again, encyclopedic knowledge is amazing what these people come out with and tell us facts about films. Alan's chosen some great Jarlos, stuff like that to talk about. And so the remit is to be as different as you can be with it, like the quality of the films are shown. We've got, like, I think it's Paul Nashi's on tonight, with one of his films, which I've never seen on the television, like Paul Nashi film. What was it called? Because we've got see if I can remember what it was called. It wasn't. Oh, it's something like the Dead Rise from the Tombs. It's called The Dead Rise from the Graves from other places, and it's brilliant.
And Paul
It's
Nashi,
just somebody who
for those that don't, he did other stuff, but he kind of specialized in werewolf, kind of
werewolf
Spanish werewolf
films.
films. Yeah.
Yeah, and we showed one last month where the werewolf battles Dr. Jekyll. I think it's Dr. Jekyll and the rest of the werewolf thing. It's a very self-explanatory title, and it's wonderful. His transformation sequence is completely old school, things like that. And he's, Paul Nashi chooses scenery as well as people. It's brilliant. And they show this variation of film. We have Hammer Sundays, which are traditional double bills, which people just love. And it's like Count as Dracula, Revenge of Frankenstein, things like that. Well, I know that I'm looking to put license more, but it's down to eyes on screen. Get people to watch the adverts. We can get more on, and the more platforms we can get on, that's the thing. But variation of contents is the key to everything. I think to keep people and have a low turnaround. So the film you have on this week, if it's a premiere for the channel, it's repeat next week and then goes away for a few months. So it's not like it's a high rotation, of product, which is great. And again, with it being free, because this day and age, how tight things are getting. Not to diss any of any streaming services out there, they do what they do well. But at the moment, I think people are prepared to sit through adverts.
Well, yeah, I mean, because like I said, I think there are certain streaming sites. I'm looking. I don't bother with Netflix. I had Netflix for quite a long time and I just ditched it because there's just nothing coming on. I know there is the odd thing that's pretty good, but I'm not going to invest just to watch the odd thing. So,
Mm,
um, but I think, the most successful well, for me in terms of what they're trying to achieve are the much more curated streaming sites like Shudder or Arrow, the Arrow sort. I
mhm.
mean, I'm lucky enough because I do a bit of work for Arrow. I get to access their film back catalogue for free. I mean, I buy most things, but
Yeah.
it's nice when you're just, doing a bit of research and there's something you've not got, you can usually find
Mhm,
some decent stuff on the arrows. So I think that I think if anything, who knows what's going to happen with streaming. I tend to think it's going to be one amalgamate, all the Netflix and your Amazon, it's just all going to be
mhm,
possibly bought by Disney and it just
mhm.
be a big monopoly,
Yeah.
which is not good for anybody.
No.
Um,
Well, I think one of the main bonuses about it though, it's like a try before you buy.
yeah, 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 yeah,
So like we showed Halloween last week. The original one. It's fabulous, and I've got countless copies. But if you haven't seen it before and you watch it, then you're probably being a horror fan. You'll go out and buy it.
yeah.
You know what I mean? I think
I
that helps people, especially when it's the European horror as well. People want to test it just before they're gonna, oh right, better see what this is like before I buy it, sort of thing.
But yeah, horror fans. I mean, I'm not trying to tar everybody with the same brush because people are different, people are individual. But I would say, in
Hmm.
general terms, your horror fans and your kind of comics fans and your sci-fi fans. But
Hmm.
I think largely your horror fans, they are the people that they might watch something on NYX and then they will go and buy it,
Hmm.
straight away
Hmm.
because that's what we do. It's kind of like part of it. I'm not saying you can't be a horror fan and I'm not saying you have to have a big collection or anything like that. It's not
Hmm.
mandatory. You can be a horror fan and access things through streaming or
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm.
But mostly I think horror fans they have that physic because they like physical media and they like that physical
Hmm.
thing. But if you've got like you said, if NYX, is great because it acts as that, it's window shopping. You can go in and have a
Hmm.
browse and
Hmm.
look at, as we'll get into later on, we're going to discuss some of the stuff you got coming up on NYX. And I think that some of those films are regardless of what I think about them or other people, they are like stuff you're not really, you can buy them on Blu-ray or whatever. But if you're not used to those films, you just want to check them out and check out a bit of Fulci or whatever. That's a
Hmm.
brilliant opportunity to do that, particularly what
Hmm.
like with a double bill or whatever. You'll sit down and you can invest in
Hmm.
it, and it's a great thing, and
Yeah.
it is tapping into those kind of older days when we used to get more curated television, which is kind of
Hmm.
not really a thing we get now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But and that's the basic premise behind it. Luckily, it's horror fans rather than a huge label behind them, so we can cherry pick where to go. And we've had a few studios come to us now, which obviously we can't say, but these are big. All right, this seems to be working in Canada and the UK. How can they get their product on there? Because I think they see that as well. If people like it, the horror fans 9 times out of 10 will buy it. Like the Whip and the Body, I hadn't seen before
Yeah,
because it was on NYX, and I went and got the Blu-ray. I got the
yeah.
88 films on. It's just brilliant. But I would have been a bit wary before. Or wait till a sale came on, but now I saw that, I thought, yeah, that is a good film.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you're, even if, I mean, talking, about sort of TV, TV that kind of had an effect. I think I have to say, obviously we talk about stuff in the 70s and 80s, but more recently, I think, your Mark Gatiss stuff, his history
Mm,
of horror and his Euro horror stuff as well, and his his,
mm,
his um documentary on Dracula. I mean, they're really good for
mm,
like, that opened up, even though I was a big horror fan anyway, but he still opened up certain things to me, that I've not
mm,
come across before. And I think, horror fans, if they are into more traditional sort of horror or your
mm.
classic horror or your Halloweens or whatever, or your John
Yeah.
Carpenter, and then suddenly you've got something like Nyx or whatever, and they are introducing you to people like Mario Bava, and it's a whole new world
Hmm.
for you to play in. You know,
Hmm.
it's the and that's the beauty of it, I think.
Yeah, which takes me back to the books we were just talking about earlier on. You see these things and you think, wow, I need to have to see what this need to find it when it comes on the television. You think, oh, right, I remember those images. I remember that poster. You know, especially the Jean Rollin posters. When you see those, or Jess Franco films, it's just amazing, and that's the idea behind it all.
Yeah, I've just been kind of because I know Indicator have put out they've been slowly releasing a lot of the Jean
Hmm.
Roland films, and yeah, I've been picking those up on Blu. They're really nice as well, and the cover
Excellent
it's
prints.
worth just getting them just for the covers. You know,
Hmm.
it's just brilliant.
Again,
You know,
Indicator, what a great label.
yeah,
I picked up a lot of their stuff just to test when they had the 3 for 15 sale on it.
yeah,
A lot of
yeah.
Richard Burton.
Yeah. It's kind of a no-brainer. When when Indicator have got a 315 sale on, it's just a
Yeah,
no-brainer.
yeah,
And also,
absolutely.
they tend to chuck out their box sets fairly cheap during this.
Hmm.
I got a few box sets from there. So
Hmm.
got the yeah for Christmas I got the Todd Slaughter box set from
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
which is
Well,
again
again,
is
that was it.
another
We showed them on NYX. We had a Todd Slaughter season for his birthday, and I
yeah.
hadn't seen them, and I thought I've got to get these.
Yeah,
You know.
we did. It was just it was weird coincidence, but we'd already Daryl, who's been on a couple of times, Daryl Buxton, he talked about the Lon Chaney film, The Unknown, first time, and then second time he came on, we did a Todd Slaughter special, and we kind of
Hmm.
planned it the day, and then it wasn't until like a couple of days before recording the podcast that we realized, oh, it's his birthday next week, so
Hmm.
we hung on to it and then released it on
Perfectly
Todd
timed.
Slaughter's birthday. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, again, I mean, how many people out of side of your sort of horror fraternity are even aware of
Hmm.
Todd Slaughter, this great
No, not
British
many
monster horror fan, a horror kind of guy, really? It's just,
with a perfect name.
yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, as Daryl pointed out, Todd in I think in German or whatever means like death and then slaughter. So it's just a great name, really, isn't it?
That's too much of a
Fantastic.
coincidence. That.
Yeah. But fantastic. And when are you going to see them? I can't recall them ever being on TV. They
Hmm.
may have been, but I can't remember them being on TV
Yeah.
on sort of mainstream TV. So the fact that
Hmm.
something like Nick's, any channel would even consider showing those. I mean, it's brilliant. Yeah.
Hmm. It is, and I think that's one of the massive perks of the channel. Apart from being free, you get to see that sort of thing. Especially if when you work for it and you realize, well, oh, you bought this. Well, I've never seen that before. You get to see a screen of it, and you think, yeah, I'm going to buy that.
Yeah, and again, probably mentioned this before, but it's a nice, particularly, it's a free channel, and even if you go on like holiday or whatever, you've usually got access to satellite channels or whatever,
Hmm.
and and even if you've not got, it's one of the things I sound really sad, but it's what I love about going on holiday. So, do we tend to go away to the coast, British coast or whatever, and you get there to your little B&B or whatever it is, and you've got a telly, and sometimes they might have streaming, sometimes they don't. And sometimes you just have to rely on what's on the channels available. And I love that you can go on, whereas I might just, plunder my Blu-ray collection to watch a film or whatever. When I've not got that on holiday, it's like, well, okay, what's on telly? And you
Yeah.
just go through and you just flick through until you find, oh, right, okay, I've not seen this for a while. I mean, I think last time I went away, I ended up watching like the the later version of Night of the Living Dead, the remake,
The Tom Savini one.
yeah, the Tom Savini remake. Yeah,
Yeah, that's brilliant.
it's
I
not
love that.
great, but
I
it's
love it,
worth
mate.
watching when you're on holiday. It's worth
Yeah,
working. We sat there. It's great. I
yeah,
love
I
that.
do like
So,
that one.
so I think Nix is really good for that. Okay, so yeah, we've talked about kind of what Nix is, and it's so I mean before this you were kind enough to send me sort of like some promo stuff on what's coming up in the next few weeks or whatever on Nix,
Mm.
and obviously there's a number of things obviously, but so we can't really talk about them all, but out of that list there were sort of three films that kind of stood out, which I think will be worth talking about, and
Mm.
I think for lots of different reasons. Um, so the first film you've got coming up on Nix is, you know, it is one of the most controversial films ever made, I think.
Four young and fearless Americans, children of the space age, armed with cameras, microphones, and curiosity. Alan Yates, Faye Daniels, and their two cameramen and inseparable friends, Jack Anders and Mark DeMont. Four youngsters who never came back. Are they still alive? And if so, where are they? These are the questions that the rescue team sponsored by New York University and the Pan American Broadcasting System hope to be able to answer.
Genuinely not controversial in that, a few sort of old biddies decided they didn't like it. It's just generally, I think it's still controversial in terms of the horror world. And I think a lot of people love it and they take every bit of it, and a lot of people don't. And I have to say, I'm not a massive fan of this film, because not because I don't, I totally appreciate that. I've talked about this film at the Broadway and stuff like that, and
Mm.
lots of it is done brilliantly. It's really well directed. It's one of the
Mhm.
it's one of the most innovative films in terms of the structure, and famously it's one of the first kind of found footage films in that sense, and it's got all this kind of stuff, and there are there's some brilliant cinematography, and there's some brilliant camera work, and a lot, as I said, it is well directed, and I think the soundtrack, the
Oh yeah,
music is beautiful.
it's incredible.
It's one of the most juxtaposed
The
sounds.
precision.
You've got this absolutely beautiful music against these incredibly horrible images. Now, I'm not, when I say I'm not a massive fan, it's because um not because of the sort of the false kind of the blood and all that, and the violence.
Mhm.
I'm more than happy to go along with that, but there are scenes in this film which make it really controversial, which
Mhm.
is there are actual animals being killed in this film,
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
so first question, I'm wondering, so are you showing it uncensored?
No, 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 no. We've
Right.
got to abide by Ofcom rules and the
Okay.
PBFC rules. So all
Uh,
the animal cruelty has been removed
yeah.
from it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there is an argument, which I don't necessarily agree with, but there is an argument which says, well, and I understand about the Ofcom rule, so I totally
Mhm.
understand where Nix is coming from. I mean, well, there's two sort of arguments. One is, well, if you censor it, so if you put it out on Blu-ray and you censor it or whatever, and you
Mhm.
take those scenes out, yeah, you can kind
Mhm.
of understand why you would do that,
Mhm.
but the argument is, well, in that sense, as pointless as those animal deaths were for the film, if you take them out,
Mhm.
it's rendered it even more pointless, because
Mhm.
so but also, the other argument, I guess, is, well, if you do take them out, as Nick has, because of
Mhm.
the Ofcom rules, does it actually make that much difference to the film? It's still as shocking. It's still a brutal kind of film.
Well, if people haven't guessed, we're talking about Cannibal Holocaust here.
Yes.
And
We should say that is Cannibal Holocaust. Yeah.
if they haven't, but to me, I think it makes it a far better film without having that sort of imagery in it. I do think it's a good, strong film, and Deodato's axe to grind was against journalism and the hypocrisy of journalism and stuff like that. And I think he does that really, really well. But the animal footage was obviously I've got the uncut version because you're a horror fan and you have it. But it just I don't think it adds nothing to it except just shows you
No.
how brutal these journalists were to get the story. And I just don't think it needed it. But the film above that, I think all the journalists' footage was shot on 16 mil. And it looks so real. I
Mm.
mean, whatever you think of Didato's techniques or whatever, he was a craftsman for this film, and I think he just really brought something extreme vividly to life. He got trialed for murder, didn't he? Almost, he had to prove the actors were still alive. Didn't they sign these non-disclosure agreements and stuff like that, so that they wouldn't appear on anything for a year. So it looked like it was genuine that had disappeared and died in the jungle, and he had to bring the actors and actresses to court to prove.
Well, I
And
guess
had to show why. The famous scene where one of the poor women are impaled. You had to take the prop to prove what it was.
yeah, I mean, it does look, I mean, so again, I am not advocating animal cruelty at all, and the
No,
stuff that
no, no.
happens with that.
Hmm.
How if I'm detaching myself emotionally and morally,
Hmm.
one of the reasons you could say is a justification for including those in that film
Hmm.
is that if you drop that in, which is obviously real, obviously
Hmm.
horrendously real,
Hmm.
but also you mix that in with obviously what he was doing to his actors, which wasn't real,
Hmm.
and it retains this really awful snuff movie feel.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, this is bizarre, but the first time I saw Cannibal Holocaust, I was about 13, 12, 13. Not
Hmm.
because I'd like, oh, I want to see this, it was literally my mate across the way. He was one of the first families that I knew that had a video recorder. We
Hmm.
didn't have one. So the first actual film I ever saw on a video recorder was American Werewolf in London. And then a few weeks later, I was round at his house during the
Hmm.
day. His dad was on the dole at the time, and they got this like Cannibal Holocaust,
Yeah.
um, copy. I didn't even know what it's called. They just put it in. It's video
Yeah.
nasty, and we sat. I was like 12 or 13
Hmm.
maybe. My mate was like 11, and his dad was there, and we all just sat there agog. And,
Hmm.
and this was completely uncut, so it's got the animal stuff in, it had the rape
Hmm.
stuff in, and it was just like I always remember to this day, my mate's dad just turned around to me at the end and said, "Don't tell your dad you've watched this." It was like, what the fuck? I was like genuinely quite, I was into my horror, but I was
Yeah.
thoroughly traumatized. And especially then, because it's like, on knackered, shitty sort of second, third hand
Generation
bootleg.
thing. Yeah.
And it's like, is this fucking real? Have I just watched a load of people being murdered? It was
Yeah. Yeah.
because it was beyond Hammer. It wasn't like those
Oh,
kind of blood. It looks
mm.
absolutely real.
This was next level. My first cannibal movie was Cannibal Ferox,
Yeah, which is
and
nasty as well.
which is just as almost as nasty. And I remember watching that, and I was like, what is this? I did not know what it was. I think my dad just rented it out. He said, oh, we'll watch this one. Because it's when you used to get the tapes in a like in a not in a proper box. It was just like in the shop label box, and you used to hand it over. So I didn't something to read on it. I didn't know anything about it. And Cannibal Holocaust, I think my dad rented it because he saw the cover. It just looked great. The cover, I think it's the one where someone's kneeling down, looks like they're eating loads of entrails. Go video,
Yeah,
you've done it
yeah,
then,
yeah, yeah.
and
That's
oh, we'll
yeah.
get this one. What the hell's
Oh,
this?
80s dads, eh?
Yeah, no, okay, but I think my dad was a bit
Could you imagine
wary.
that? Could you imagine if you in
Yeah,
court?
safeguarding incident going on. But he tried to deflect it, the harrowing bits with humor, proper northeast humor. And I remember the jokes he tried to crack, and it was just like I think he was a bit, what's going on here? This looks a bit real, a bit raw, you know.
But he's in
A bit
too
like
deep at that point. He can't turn it off.
we've
He'd
got to
have to
see what
he'd have to
happens at the
admit he's
end.
made a mistake at that point. You've got to
Yeah.
see it through to the end. My kid's
And
going to
then
be
the music kicks
traumatized.
in.
Yeah, the
The
music's
music.
brilliant. And
I've
there,
got that
there,
on
there
orange
are,
vinyl for some reason. Yeah.
like I said, some scenes in it are just, like I said, that the photography is just great. And there are some, I'm not talking about particularly violent scenes, but there are some great scenes where it's just so eerie. There's one of the most memorable scenes to me is where all the sort of cannibals are just kind of sat on that wooden platform, and they kind of and they kind of resemble, the birds from Hitchcock, and it's kind
Hmm.
of they're just it's so quiet and eerie and horrible. It
Hmm.
is like the calm before the storm, and
Hmm.
once things kick off, it's just,
Yeah,
it's,
and like they keep saying the concrete jungle, the urban jungle, and of course the real jungle, and which ones are the real animals, and which ones are
yes,
and it does make a valid point to an extent, and I know it goes to an extreme, but it's just so well acted as well.
yeah,
I
it's
don't think they
good.
get enough credit. I really don't think the actors and actresses get enough credit on it. And
I, I, I would
we've got a
argue that
documentary. Sorry,
if
mate, go on.
you've never seen it, as much as I'm saying, it's got some truly horrendous stuff in. Obviously, the animal stuff has been cut out of the NYX version, but I would say watch it, even if it's only once, because it is,
Hmm.
it is as horrendous as it is in places. It is really well done. I don't
Hmm.
want to overplay. I'm not I wouldn't insist this film is banned or anything.
Hmm.
It's just, it's not necessarily for me, but I think it does what it's meant to do very,
Hmm.
very well.
Yeah, and if you don't mind spoilers, before it's shown, we've got a documentary brand new with Alan Jones and Kim Newman. It's called Cannibal Holocaust Exposed. It's both of them talking about its impact on cinema, socially, its impact on other directors, obviously Eli Roth mainly, and it's a really good documentary. It's just the two guys talking about it, and you just learn so much from these, legendary journalists, and that puts it on perspective, what it's about, what's good, what's bad. So if you're unsure about the film, obviously if you're over 18 and you're unsure about the film, watch that first. There will be spoilers, but they'll prepare you for the impact of it. Because I can't think of any other TV channel that's ever shown this.
Yeah.
This, and that's what the beauty of NYX is about. And but just Alan and Kim have done just a brilliant piece. Just them two talking heads there, great, and that sets you up for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is on the 88 release of Zombie Holocaust, which is kind of combines, it's very
Hmm.
much on the back of Zombie Flesh Eaters
It is,
and
yeah.
Cannibal Holocaust, and it kind of
Hmm.
combines the two ideas really. But
Hmm.
there's a great documentary on that which kind of takes you through the sort of history of extreme Italian horror, really, and obviously Kim has quite a big role in that.
Hmm.
So he's one of the main talking heads, and that's a
Hmm.
fascinating documentary as well. So yeah, so I'd like to see that actually on Nick,
Hmm.
because I've got a lot of time for Kim Newman. I think he's a really good spokesman for the sort of old horror stuff, and other things as well. But
Hmm.
he's got someone I've got a lot of time for.
Hmm. And it's coming from his knowledge. He's not just
Yeah.
someone who's just read about the label and wants to get on
Yes.
TV sort of thing. When you get these horrible programs on TV that are like the whatever worst sitcom of the 70s, and you get all these people, B list, Z list people trying to talk about something that wasn't even shown when they were born, and they've got a review on it, and they haven't watched it. They've not watched like one episode or something. These are people who actually know what they're talking about.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that on Sky Arts. I don't really watch Sky Arts anymore, but I went through a
Hmm.
phase of watching it because they had these daily documentaries about
Hmm.
certain actors, and some of it was okay, but a lot of it you could just think, well, you've got
You
your
could have said
kind of
that.
journalistic pedigree, and that's what
Hmm.
you. But no, you don't know anything about this really. You can tell
No.
you're just reading the Wikipedia page. It's not. There's no.
But it's
There's
accurate.
no, because there's no passion. There's no. You can't because they had the same sort of set of pundits every week, and I was thinking, well, you can't possibly be
Hmm.
passionate or know about everything. It's just not. No, it's a bit disingenuous. Whereas someone like Kim Newman, if Kim Newman's talking to me about Cannibal Holocaust or whatever, then
You're going to listen.
I know he knows it inside out, and he's going to offer some really interesting insights. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, Holocaust is an Italian film, and I think that I've got a huge soft spot for Italian horror films and other
Hmm.
Italian sort of genre films as well. I mean,
Hmm.
I've said this again and again and again, but I will, when it comes to westerns, there are a handful of American westerns I will really enjoy, but hands down, I will take an Italian spaghetti western over an American western any day of the
Mhm.
week. They're
Mhm.
just far more interesting, far more entertaining, and you've got some brilliant directors involved and brilliant characters involved, and so but I think that the history. I did a course at the Broadway specifically on Italian cult horror because I think
Mhm.
it's such a fascinating area. And one of the things I love about it is I mean, I would, arguably, if you put the spaghetti westerns to one side, uh,
Mhm.
the 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 kind of again, I really like this term, but the golden age, I think, for Italian horror films, obviously you've got a lot of stuff from Mario Bava into the
Mhm.
60s, which is great, and I'm not knocking or anything like that. But then you had, Dario Argento came on the scene in the sort of
Mhm.
early 70s. Um, but I think that for a certain type of horror film from Italy, the golden age was kind of like from the end of the 70s to the mid 80s.
Mhm.
It was
Mhm.
just, and obviously Cannibal Holocaust fits into that sort of remit, really.
Mhm.
And what I love about that period, little bit like the spaghetti westerns, was the the sort of copyright laws and things like that were far more lax in Italy, which meant that essentially you can or you could basically put out a film and just say it was a sequel to another film, even though it had
Yeah.
no real connection.
Mhm.
And the most famous, really the most famous example of that is obviously you've got Night of the Living Dead by
Mhm.
George Romero, and then years later or 9 years later, he did Dawn of the Dead.
Mhm.
Now, in order to get the funding for that, he had to go to Dario Argento.
Mhm.
And what Dario Argento said was, well, yeah, I can help you with the funding. I can help you to get the film off the ground with,
Mhm.
I can give you an influx of money. But what I want in return is that I want to put my own edit of it,
Mhm.
and I want to release it in Italy for that market. So that's what he did. So in in this country and America, it was called Dawn of the Dead. In
Mhm.
Italy, it was called Zombie. Zombie as in
The BI. Yeah.
ZOMBI. And Dario Argento he put he did a slightly different soundtrack and he edited it in and he cut it and he released an Italian version. Now, I
Mhm.
think if I remember right, the Italian version was released, the Dario Argento cut was released before Dawn of the Dead was released in this country or America. I think slightly before.
Mhm.
It became this huge hit. And so very cheekily, another production company came in and it's like, well, we need to put an unofficial sequel out to this,
Yeah.
which became Zombie 2,
Two. Yeah.
which in our country and America became Zombie Flesh Eaters, the
Especially. Yeah.
Lucio Fulci film. And then on the back of that, you've then got a whole franchise of, so we've got this Zombie Flesh Eaters, which is basically Zombie 2, which is an unofficial official type
Sequel. Yeah.
sequel to Dawn of the Dead. But then Zombie Flesh Eaters or zombie films, they become another franchise in itself.
Self.
And then
Yeah.
there are certain films in that. So you've got Zombie Flesh Eaters 2, which was a kind of Lucio Fulci film, but
Uh,
he got ill, so someone else had to take over. Then you've got like Zombie Flesh Eaters 3, and then Zombie Flesh Eaters 4, which is nothing really to do with anything.
is it the
And but
birds one? Has it got the
yeah,
birds in
it's
the
the
title?
birds
That one.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is had nothing to do with any of the other films, but it somehow ends up being classed as Zombie Flesh Eaters
Mm.
4 or Zombie 5, So
Five.
I just love how utterly confusing it
Mm.
is. There's a
Absolutely.
lot, you say you had Dario Argento produced Demons and Demons 2, but then
Mm.
you've got other films that were intended to be Demons 3 and Demons 4. And in some territories, they're released as Demons 3 and Demons 4. But then in other territories, they're released as completely different titles. So
Different things.
it's one of the most confusing but
Yeah.
beloved area of cinema, I think. And some
Mhm.
cracking stuff was released around that time. So, you know, obviously we talked about Cannibal Holocaust and we mentioned Lucio Fulci there. And I
Yeah.
think Zombie Flesh Eaters was, you know, absolutely on the video nasty list. And it was, um, you know, one of those films that it was almost like a badge of honor watching Zombie Flesh
Mhm.
Eaters. You had to see Zombie Flesh
Absolutely.
Eaters. And it was, you know, definitely one of those films that was doing the rounds on bootleg video
Mhm.
in the 80s. And it was just an incredible film. And I think, you know, I've written about this film before, and I wrote, in fact, I wrote a big booklet on all of those kind of Fulci sort of zombie films for
Mhm.
88 for the release of Zombie 5 when they released Zombie 5.
Mhm.
And I've written about Zombie Flesh Eaters for other magazines as well. And it is absolutely one of my favorite films. And I think
Mhm.
it's in some ways um I kind of prefer it to Dawn of the Dead. I love Romero, don't get me wrong. I love all his
Mhm.
kind of work, but in some ways there is what, you know, because as I pointed out there, it's often seen as being this unofficial sequel to Dawn of the Dead,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
sometimes people will see it in lesser terms, but
Mhm.
actually I think what Fulci brought to the table with he created a lot of the stuff that would be used later on in this you
Mhm.
know, and interestingly, even though it's seen as being this kind of rip-off of Dawn of the Dead, he brought a lot of original stuff to that. I mean, the way that
Mhm.
zombies look in that, they actually look like
They
corpses.
looked dead, didn't they?
Whereas
Yeah.
in Dawn of the Dead, they just kind of look like blue, sort of
Bluey,
grey
greeny. Yeah.
caricatures, really, which is kind of the
Yeah.
point. But it
Mhm.
wasn't until you had Zombie Flesh Eaters that Romero came back with Day of the Dead, which is much more graphic.
Mhm.
But I think, and there's a lot of imagery from Day of the Dead, particularly in those opening scenes where they're walking around the street, which is lifted straight from Zombie Flesh Eaters. So I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
the two directors really influenced each other. I think it's fair
Mhm.
to say that Lucio Fulci ripped him off.
Yeah.
I think it brings Flesh Eaters brings
Yeah.
so much to that sort of subgenre.
Mhm. He riffed on it a little bit, but then I thought with these effects, with the effects on it, it just made the throat biting sequence is incredible.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I still think that stands up today. You know,
Yes.
let's just
And
forget
you
about
know,
this the swimming zombie.
exactly. Who I how can you not like a film that has a scene where a zombie is basically attacking a shark underwater? I mean, it's
Yeah,
brilliant. And also I love kind of how unpolitically correct it is in places as well. There is this
yeah, it is.
scene
It is.
where there's the woman and she's getting undressed, and it makes me laugh every time because he's so cheeky. You know, Fulci or whoever was doing the cinematography made sure that they positioned these mirrors in exactly the right place. So you get one shot, but you manage to see her front bottom, her bottom, and her breasts in the same shot.
Yeah,
I
he's
mean,
getting value
it
for money in
absolutely
this
has
sequence.
nothing to do with the plot whatsoever.
No,
Or
no,
let's
just
go
total
scuba
gratuity.
diving. Yeah, I'm going to go scuba diving, but I'm going to do
On
topless scuba
top of scuba
diving.
diving. Yeah, that'll fight the zombies off.
It is. He kind of throws everything at the screen. It is, you know, and I think it is like the it's like the Christmas, New Year, Halloween firework day of zombie films. It's just got everything in there. It's
Yeah.
brilliantly entertaining.
Mhm.
And you've got that just a double whammy at the beginning where, you know, you've got the zombie in the boat, and
Mhm.
the even before that on the island where the zombie rises up from the death shroud and gets shot in the head.
Shot in the
And
head.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
just great.
that signals something different, doesn't it? That did signal. Oh, this is going to be different. So that zombie on the boat
Yeah.
looks amazing.
It's just got such an authority that a lot of films
Hmm.
didn't have, you know. It's
Hmm.
brilliant. It's great. getting back to NYX, so
So we've
obviously,
shown that one. We have
yeah,
actually shown that one.
yeah,
So
but also coming up, you've got two more, arguably, I mean, for horror fans are well aware of these films, but I think
mhm,
usually if anybody has seen a Lucio Fulci film, it will have been Zombie Flesh Eaters. But
mhm,
in some ways, Zombie Flesh Eaters is he didn't get full control of that, and there were things
mhm,
added later on he wasn't necessarily aware of. Whereas I think the films he did slightly later on are much more pure Fulci, and I think these
mhm,
two are excellent examples. So he did this Gates of Hell trilogy, and two of the episodes of that trilogy were House by the Cemetery and City of the Living Dead, and they're
mhm.
both coming up as is it a double bill?
It's double bill for his
Yeah.
birthday. Well, what would have been his birthday? Yeah.
Yeah, so on and so how would you kind of so maybe someone's seen Zombie Flesh Eaters but they've not seen anything else by Fulci. How would you sell these films? I mean, I own them both in my collection, the great films, but how would you sell them?
Well, House by the Cemetery, I would sell it as a really over the top gory film with loads of zoom shots in it. It's a great film. Apart from some of the dubbing for the young lad for Bob, bless him. But I think as invention goes, I think it's really well done. It's a straightforward plot. Um, these people are just harangued mercilessly. It's got loads of cool kills in it, and the knife in the back of the head sequence in it. It's not as gothic as the one the City of Living Dead, 'cause that's more Lovecraft.
Yeah.
But this one, it's just it's full cheap bit more over the top. It's like to me.
Yeah, like I said, I think, obviously with Flesh Eaters, which I love, it's you know and he brought so much to that subgenre, which was
Mm,
original. But again, from being more analytical, I could say that he was kind of slightly hampered. He wasn't necessarily,
mhm.
there were things he was having to include because of the market at that time, and I guess
Yeah,
producers were asking him to put this in and put this in.
and,
But
and it was his third film of that year, wasn't it? He made
yeah,
something. I think he made the Black Cat and the Beyond that year as well.
yeah. I
So
mean, Beyond is another really good one as well, I
it's a
think.
bloody good film that.
Yeah.
But to come out with still something that looks good, looks professional, I think he's done a great job with that one. But the City of Them Dead's my favorite of the two. That one's the stronger one in my opinion. But there's still much to enjoy with it. Like I said, you know, the effects in Zombie were obvious that there's going to be gut munching and things like this, but with this one, you don't expect it to be this violent. Like when the guy gets attacked by a bat,
Yeah.
he stabs it and the blood goes everywhere, doesn't he? He's stabbing it with these massive pair of shears, the most vicious bat in the world. But it's copious amounts of gore, isn't this one?
Yeah, I think that, and I think also Fulci, because I mean, everybody talks about Dario Argento, and I love
Mm,
Argento, don't get me wrong, and
mhm,
just brilliant films,
mhm.
He did some great, maybe not so great stuff later on, but he did at his
Yeah,
height, he did some incredible stuff.
they both
And
had their peaks
obviously,
and troughs at the same time, didn't they? Really?
yeah, and I think before that, obviously, you had Mario Bava, who was
Hmm.
you know, just incredible and incredibly consistent. Again, one of those directors that was just absolutely consistent.
Hmm.
Whether he was doing something like Planet of the Vampires, which was kind of like a sci-fi horror, or whether he was
Hmm.
doing more sort of kind of traditional. Well, I say traditional, he kind of invented the form really, but the Giallo
Hmm.
film, all that. He was just incredibly consistent, and his
Hmm.
films just look beautiful and dreamlike
Hmm.
and incredible, really.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that Fulci doesn't. I mean, he's beloved by the horror community. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think he always gets the credit for. I think he influenced a lot of Italian horror films that came a little bit later on and were
Hmm.
kind of maybe got lost in the mix a little bit. So
Hmm.
he certainly, I think there's a big influence of
Hmm.
Fulci on something like Della Morte, Della More, and also stuff like Zeta as well, because
Hmm.
and I think it's not, if you've only watched. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you've got like graphic stuff in most of Fulci's films,
Hmm.
but it's not just about the graphic stuff. It's about that
Hmm.
eeriness. Like you said, City of the Living Dead is much more Lovecraftian
Hmm.
and not Lovecraftian in a crass way,
No, no, no.
truly Lovecraftian. And I
Hmm.
think that's what he brings to it. And if you look at something, I mean, in something like Della Morte, Della More, you've got it's got, I think, what they take. I mean, it's got a lot of philosophical stuff in it, and it's kind of over the top. But I
Hmm.
think it's that over the top stuff that they kind of bought from Fulci. Whereas something like Zeta, Zeta's quite a late sort of
Hmm.
Italian horror film, really. But it's
Hmm.
superb. It's just and the thing that's great about it is it's so eerie and it's tapping into the uncanny. And I think
Hmm.
that is absolutely what Fulci could at his best, he
Hmm.
could really do that. And I think, other films like, Don't Torture a Duckling, stuff like that. He was a really gifted filmmaker. And I think
Hmm.
that he is kind of, I think sometimes you've got Bava and then Dario Argento. And I think, and obviously before you had like Sergio Leone and who were creating other things, spaghetti
Hmm.
westerns, whatever. And I don't think Fulci he doesn't get the respect a lot of the time, but I think he
I think
brought a lot to cinema.
yeah, I think because he became so prolific towards his, that tarred his reputation, I think, a bit, and that's why he's not. But you look at his stuff from late 70s to mid 80s, it's just fantastic, especially in like something like City of the Living Dead, which has more gravitas to it with the Dunwich connection from the Dunwich Horror Story, which is in it. The suicide of the priest, the person being buried alive, proper close. That sequence is brilliant. It's far better than Buried ever was. That sequence where that person's buried alive and the guy tries to free using a pickaxe. It's the last thing you do when someone's lying in a coffin is use a pickaxe to try and get them out. But that it's really claustrophobic, and the team up to and again I think this is the one with is this the one where the woman is was it she gets attacked or a possession? She thinks she throws her insides up on this one. Yeah.
Yes, I think so. Yes, yes.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got, I think in Bay, definitely in the Beyond, but also I think we've also got those classic, he liked he liked destroying his eyeballs, didn't he?
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
think Freud would have had a lot to say about Fulci.
Yeah, he was the king of eye trauma, like
Yeah.
stuff like that. But I think again, if you watch them, obviously you're watching them back to back, you can see his style, you can see his setup, and in both films, he's got a great sense of suspense and tension. You know,
Well,
I think that's really powerful, especially the coffin sequence.
well, I
I
think
think
I
it's
think what he
incredible.
was great at is that what one of the things I'm not dismissing everything like this, but I think
Hmm.
occasionally one of the problems with kind of your more Hollywood type horror, I think,
Uh-huh.
is the constant use of your jump cut.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of like, eerie music, and then it just jumps out, and then it's
Yeah.
done, and then there's no kind of
Hmm.
there's no lasting power with that really. It's very superficial. Whereas I think
Hmm.
Fulci was kind of the opposite of that.
Hmm.
What he would do is kind of like he'd show you, right,
Hmm.
okay, I'm going to do this, and you're thinking as an audience, no, you're not going to do that.
And he'll
And
do it. Yeah.
he'll show you every
Hmm.
painful little second of that. The
Yeah.
classic being the eye
Yeah.
sequence in Zombie Flesh Eaters. It's like, oh
Which
no,
is
no,
still difficult
no,
to
you're
watch, isn't
not.
it?
No, you're not.
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
It's
Yes, I
to
am.
me that's more powerful horror than a jump cut,
Yeah, yeah.
jump scare or whatever.
Because
Because
it's making us sit through it. That
I
that
think in one,
it's challenging us.
yeah, in one of the films, I'm sure someone gets a head squeeze and the brain like comes out or the back of the skull
Yes.
comes out, and you see it all. A bit like the knife from someone's skull from behind, it comes out the mouth, and it would have been, it's not a scare, it's shock. You're seeing it, you're witnessing this grisly murder, and he's showing you up close. And that was what he was powerful at. That was his powerful filmmaking. A bit like Diodato going back Cannibal Holocaust. He showed the effects. He showed the horror. That's what he was driving at, because journalists showed horror all the time, but he was getting lambasted for showing it. And I think Fulci showed the horror in a slightly different way, and it was still pretty realistic. Some of the effects really do stand up still.
Yeah, because it was done in a sort of creative way. It wasn't simply just splatter. It was well thought out. You could tell this has been intricately storyboarded. And there is thought behind it, and and it's not going to be for everybody, but it's brilliantly done. It's really well done. Like you say, it still stands up.
Yeah, you show me like a zombie film, like his zombie film, and what can compare to it, even nowadays. I know zombies died a death again. You got The Walking Dead and the churning countless spin-offs from that, but they're not as powerful as what he managed to create. You don't want to be original once, I suppose, and zombies are very limited, but his were superb.
So James, quick plug then. So where can people access NYX then?
Well, NYX, like I said before, it's just hit freely on 578. If you've got it's a Hisense or Toshiba television, one of the new ones that's already built in. It's obviously an app on there, or you can go to Freeview 289 and view on there. Channel Box and Distro apps are there, so you can watch them on the phone if you want, or watch it through Roku if you want, or just go to the website, nyxtv.co.uk, and you can watch us from there as well. So, and the more people tune in, the more adverts are watched, and the more we can do, and the more platforms we can get on, because they're not the cheapest things in the world, that's for sure.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for coming back on again, James. It's been always a pleasure, never a chore to speak to you, and it's been lovely to see you again, mate.
And you.
So it just remains for me to say, remember to call round next time. Make yourself at home. You look like you're dying for a nice cup of tea for terror.
And remember, my friend, future events such as these will affect you in the future.